Well, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you happen to be around the world as you are watching this Office Hours from Hosting.com's Agency Success. My name is Nathan Ingram, and I'm the host here at Office Hours and the agency trainer here at Hosting.com. So glad you've joined us today. We have another really interesting week of news to talk about as we get started, and plenty of time for your questions as well. So glad you've all joined us today. It should be interesting. 4 questions currently in the queue. If you have a question to ask, the link to do so is in the chat. And if you'd like to get a question in before office hours starts, you can always do that by going to wpnathan.com and just clicking the Ask a Question link up in the header. You can ask your question anytime during the week, and we'll answer those roughly in the order they're received every week. So if you are watching this on a replay, you don't have to be live to ask a question. All right, folks, let's get started with some news, shall we? If you'd like to download this slide deck, the link to do so is in the chat. This is a direct download link from Google Drive that will download this HTML document, which is the slides, just a single HTML file, right to your computer. All right, so what has happened this week? Has anybody noticed any news this week? We'll start with something we talked about last week, which is quite interesting. And that is that we at hosting.com have launched an AI application hosting platform. This is something that's been in the process for a little while, and it is using Cloudflare Enterprise architecture and the Nova site building system, which is a tool that WebPros created. WebPros is the company that owns cPanel. It is quite interesting, and it allows you to create websites right from your favorite AI tool. So I would encourage you to take a look at this blog post if you didn't already last week. Take a look at that and see all the neat things that are available with AI application hosting. It's a pretty cool platform. Also, along that same vein, maybe you saw this news this week. So Cloudflare announced, oddly, yesterday, April the 1st, which is in many places April Fool's Day, where all the jokes are played, that they have built a what they called the spiritual successor to WordPress. I don't know why they did this on April the 1st, but they have a history of doing this, by the way. When Cloudflare launched their DNS service 1.1.1.1, they did it on April the 1st. I don't know what it is about that, but anyway, so yes, this is a real thing. Cloudflare has launched this new CMS called mdash, which is even funnier because mdash is the thing that people look for. It's like the main tell for AI generated text, but they've called it mdash, and it exists. It is, they say they built it in 2 months with coding agents. It is built to answer the primary concern, they say, with WordPress, which is security. Every plugin runs in its own isolated worker, Cloudflare worker instance, which is kind of a cool way to do things, actually. So that if a plugin happens to get compromised, it can't touch the file system. But this isn't WordPress plugins, right? It's not. The WordPress plugins don't work here. So it's interesting. Search Engine Journal has an article about it. I've got those both linked here in the deck. Roger Monti at Search Engine Journal has basically said, look, it's at 0.1. It's very, very, very beta. You do have to have a CLI to set this up, like from your local machine. There is no real visual builder, and it's definitely for developers right now. However, it is at 0.1. It's very, very beta. You can, if you just want to click around, here's a link for the playground instance, and this is what mdash looks like. It looks a whole heck of a lot like WordPress, doesn't it? It is, in fact, lightning fast. But when you get in here to actually edit a post, there's not a whole lot. It looks like WordPress, doesn't it? Except there's no block editor, there's no page builders, there's no all of this. It works, but you can't do much with it. So it's got a media library. You can upload things. It has comments. It has menus. You can do redirects right from within the UI, which is interesting. There are widgets here, which it's like the old fashioned, if we go to a blog post, it's like the sidebar of widgets like old school WordPress here. Not terribly impressive, but that is there. Sections. These are like reusable blocks. So if you are in the Cadence world or the generate press world, it's like elements, right? Built into the CMS, which I kind of like. Categories, tags, bylines tells you a little bit about it's like author profiles. One interesting thing is they do have custom post types built into the OS here, where you can create a custom content type, or from within an existing one, you can add custom fields, which is interesting right there in the core. User management, here's where you can do plugins. There's not really any there. This is pretty interesting. They do have a WordPress importer for mdash. I tried this. It didn't work. Well, it kind of worked. Okay. I tried to import WP Nathan into an instance of mdash, and it pulled everything in, all the posts, all the images. It got all the things, but it doesn't understand Gutenberg blocks. And so WP Nathan is just all this is a Cadence starter site with all, it's just built in Cadence blocks. And it pulled all that stuff in as just HTML. So it doesn't understand today blocks. So I don't know. It's interesting. It's a 0.1 though. Settings as you would expect, but look, it's social media aware, and it is SEO aware and all these things. So it does have passkeys out of the box, not in the playground instance. You'd have to do your own, but yeah, it has API built in. Yeah, so there's a lot here. It's pretty interesting. It's pretty quick. And Sherry, yes, it does use Astro as it's pushing out content from this back end to the front end. So essentially, what this is a back end CMS UI for Astro, which is a site building platform. It is interesting, and it's definitely something to watch. It is definitely a developer tool right now. But yeah, this was I may even have said it when we did the news story several weeks ago when Cloudflare acquired Astro, that they're probably going to have a site building platform from this. I thought it if I didn't say it, but that's exactly what's happened here. So interesting. Is it death to WordPress? Not even, no. Full stop. No. Not today. So there you go. Moving on. Claude, did you see this one? Claude Code's source was leaked on NPM. So as part of it was like an error dump. Some of Claude Code's source code, about 60 megabytes worth, was dumped out in this downloadable format. The leak revealed a 3-layer memory architecture, unreleased daemon mode called Kairos that consolidates memory in the background. Yeah, so this Anthropic says this was human error, and it was just they were building a package and some stuff got dumped out of it, and it was downloadable, and it happened to contain source code, not just errors. So anyway, it was a human error, but as developers do, this one particular developer named Sigrid Jin grabbed the source code, stayed up all night, and built something they call Claw code, which is a Python rewrite of Claude's code agent. What that means is because they rebuilt it in Python, and then now they're actually working on it in Rust now. It's no longer subject to like a DCMA copyright takedown notice because it's a new work or a derivative work. So it's totally safe. And so it's all out there in this GitHub repo, and you can download it if you want to. Interesting. And Chris is correct. This is frozen in time, so it's this source code as it was the moment it was dumped. So there you go. Who knows? At the very least, it is informative on how Claude's architecture works, particularly for, unfortunately, Anthropic's competitors. So there you go. Another interesting story here. This is there's a benchmark called Meter, METR, that basically looks at how do we measure the power, I guess, of AI tools over time. And what they've done is they've taken this scale, and it's like how long a human programmer takes to do the same work. And so, but here's what this means. GPT 3.5 could do the work in a session that it would take a human programmer 30 seconds to do. Like that was its capacity. It could handle the thought work and the output that a human programmer could do in about 30 seconds. So you may remember years ago when GPT 3.5 was the big thing, it could do code snippets, kind of, right? Yeah, kind of. It's really when it got to GPT 4 and 4.5 that code snippets were really starting to become a thing. And so GPT 4, it could do the work of a programmer in 4 minutes. Like the work a programmer could do in 4 minutes is what it had the capacity to do. And it's just gotten larger. So look at this over time. Here's 2022 with GPT 3.5, 2023 with GPT 4. This is, and then moving forward and up. Look how much more quickly, and now Claude Opus way up here, how much more quickly this is going to where today Claude's flagship model, Opus 4.6, is able to do in a session what a human programmer would take 12 hours to do. So stated another way, a task that would fill a developer's entire workday is now able to be accomplished in Claude Opus through just some prompts. That's pretty amazing. And this is just growing at scale. And the reason that these tools, I mean, look at all these drops right here just in the last few months of Claude and ChatGPT. This is happening because AI is riding the next AI model. So Claude Opus 4.6 is riding the next version of Claude. The current versions of OpenAI stuff is riding the next version. And it's just happening faster and faster and faster. So this AI thing isn't going anywhere, in case you're wondering. It is quite interesting, and the capabilities are getting to be frightening. Story number 5 here. They have released a post-mortem on WordPress's initiative to fill your inbox with as many emails as possible in a 3-day period. So 6.9.2, 3, and 4, I'm sure remember, were released very quickly after each other a few weeks ago. And so they've released a post-mortem on this. And what they discovered was the root cause was a missing verification step. Nobody independently confirmed that the commits that they had made had actually merged into the trunk before the package shipped. That's a problem. And so they've identified that. They've adjusted some processes. This whole thing highlighted some tension between the WordPress security team and core and all of these things. And this really is a big part of the deal. WordPress core is currently maintaining 22 active backport branches. Now, what does that mean? Well, when a security release from WordPress is updated, that third, the this version of a WordPress install, it's also backported way back to WordPress, I think 5 dot something. I forget what the cap is, but it's backported across 22 different versions right now, which is just, that's insane to me, but that's what they're currently doing. And nobody asked me my opinion, but I think they ought to stop doing that. It's just too much work. It has to be done manually currently. And like, if you're not updating your stuff, it's consuming too many core resources to keep way out of date versions of WordPress up to date. So I don't know. That's got to be a serious problem. And like Chris just said, this is 22 opportunities to have an error, which is a lot of the source of what happened today. There's not a ton of resources being invested in core, and what they have is stretched thin. Separately, and I just added this as an oh, by the way, Matthias Ventura, who's the lead for WordPress 7, confirmed that the cycle is going to be extended by several weeks just because of the issues that we talked about last week regarding the real-time collaboration architecture. So that has been pushed. I don't think they've nailed. I wasn't able to find a newly updated release date. It may actually still be officially next week, but I think they're going to push that. WordPress AI connectors have no plugin level controls. This is a big one. My buddy Marcus over at the WP World published an article about how this new connector functionality that we showed the past couple of weeks, where you can actually add your AI tool right into core WordPress. There's no filter that you could add that would say these plugins can access, but these plugins can't. And so that's an oversight, and that's something that they are working on building in. So alongside these connectors where the different models, you can give your Claude instance access to WordPress or your ChatGPT or whatever. There'll be some controls that say this plugin can access that API key, but these can't, for example. And I think that's a really good idea. So that's coming. Don't know when that's coming, but it is on the radar. And finally, before we get into questions, the admin bar has released its 2026 survey, State of the WordPress Agency. 622 agency owners over 50 countries with a lot of interesting detail. If you want to read the survey, you can do that right here at this link. It is really nice to read. Just a few stats I'll pull out. The mean team size is one person, or pardon, the median team size is one person. Basically, most people doing what we do are doing it by themselves as a solo practitioner. And the others are like 2.4 is the median. So right here, you can see that. The vast majority of WordPress agencies are between 1 and 3 people, what I would call micro agencies. If you are charging $5,000 or more per project, you hit about 57% chance that you're profitable. That's pretty good. And it kind of drops off after that. Recurring revenues, the clearest predictor of stability. I think we could all guess that. Agencies that actively pursue leads are twice as likely to break 200K in revenue. In other words, you have an active sales funnel, whatever that looks like. AI positive agencies grew 58% in 2025 and are optimistic. Negative agencies, much less of a growth rate and much less optimism. And that's just a few stats. I'd invite you to go take a look at this whole survey. It is quite interesting. Lots of interesting things there. All right, let's see. What did I miss here? Yes, few upcoming live streams here for April. Let me remind you to, if you haven't already, register for Plugin Roundup. It's coming back on Tuesday, just a few days away now for the first quarter of 2026. We've got a great list already, and we're still brushing that list up. So make sure you join us for the return of Plugin Roundup on Tuesday, April the 7th. The impact of word of mouth on today's businesses. This is a couple of folks from hosting.com. Daphne and Ali will be here talking about the impact of word of mouth advertising. And finally, I'll be talking on the 28th about the image problem, which is the easiest fix for WordPress speed. So we'll be diving into the world of WordPress images and how to optimize your site from the perspective of images. All right. Let's see. Somebody had asked about the download links. That link bundle is waiting on you in the chat. If you want to access downloads, slide decks, things that have been shared, downloads.myagencysuccess.com takes you to the shared Google Drive folder. All right. Well, let's get into some questions, shall we? If you have a question to ask during today's office hours, please use the link that is waiting on you there in the chat. 6 questions in the queue right now, beginning with Ben Bradley. Hey, Ben. Ben says, a client received a poor spoof email. Interesting. A client of mine received a poor spoof email this morning using a Gmail account. info.cosmiccarrot@gmail.com. Look at that. The message was, wanted to follow up quickly as I haven't heard back yet. To prevent disruptions, it's important we verify your websites, Interesting. Kind regards, Cosmic Carrot. Thankfully, the client realized the email was not from us and sent it to us to confirm. Apart from DMARC on our domain setup and letting clients know we don't use Gmail, is there anything else we can do to prevent this? Unfortunately, not really that I'm aware of. And DMARC isn't even going to help you here because they did not send from cosmiccarrot.com. They sent from a Gmail address. What you would do in this case is report that Gmail address to Gmail abuse. You can Google a link, it's there. And it is, unfortunately, there's no way to stop this. This would be good communication to your clients. How did they get that address? I don't know. Or if this person is listed maybe on your website, it's getting. I mean, think about this. If you were a scammer and you think, well, I'm going to try to harvest some information from some agency's client list, you could set up a multi-tiered process with any AI tool and say, go find me the web agencies in this location. Boom. Now go visit every one of those websites and see if they have a portfolio page. Boom. Here's all the URLs that they list. Now go find a contact email on each one of those websites. Boom. And now send this canned email to that list. It's not, you can, I mean, just not that hard to do these days with AI. So, yeah, it's simple. So I think, yeah, it's very likely we're going to see more of this. And, you know, AI is a tool like anything else. It's like AI is like a brick. You can use it to build a house. You can use it to throw through somebody's window. Yeah. So unfortunately, this is solved, I think, Ben, by just communicating with our clients to let them know, hey, this just happened. And by the way, you know, this is how hackers are working and why it's important that I'm part of your world to help you think through these things. It is a great share, Ben, and I'm grateful that you did that. I wish it was something that could be solved by DMARC. DMARC would solve them emailing from your domain name if it's set up correctly, but not from a Gmail account. That is something. All righty. Next up in the list is also Ben. Following up on the webinar on Tuesday, that was our Rewrite Your Website live stream. I've tried to upload the Markdown alternate main plugin by Yoast. Cloudflare is blocking the upload with array ID. Ben, are you saying you can't upload this zip file to WordPress? That's awfully weird. I've never seen that happen, and it may be, Ben, that you've got some setting in Cloudflare that is hyper aggressive. But whereas Cloudflare now moved the area to filter the array ID so you can upload. Let me, oh, I have Cloudflare open over here. All right. So Cloudflare being Cloudflare regularly moves things around and renames them. So where that is located now is under security and analytics and then events. Okay. So here you can filter by array ID equals something, and that will show you the traffic. And it could be like a lot of times, I don't know, somebody in the Netherlands doesn't like me. Oof. They're trying to find something. Anyway, it will oftentimes tell you what is blocking right here. Like, what is the rule set or the rule that caused that block event to happen? And that can often help you narrow down what to deal with. That is interesting. It may be something with security headers or browser validation, something like that sounds possible. Like look in those areas, like browser. It'd be great if I could spell correctly. Not browser rendering. It's not even going to show up. It's called browser validation or something like that. It's a very granular setting. I have never seen that happen. Melanie's saying she has seen it happen, so you're not alone. That is really odd, but it's likely, you know, once you find that array ID, it will give you a hint of what to go look for, what's actually causing the problem. Has anybody else seen that? And how did you solve it? Melanie says she FTP'd the plugin, which is not fantastic, but it is it's a workaround. That is really interesting. I would start looking at the browser validation and security headers as the first place to start sniffing. All right. If you have a question to ask, please use the link that's in your chat. And next up is class. Termageddon cookie banner and Lightspeed are not playing nice. I added the Termageddon cookie banner to one of my websites built with Cadence and using Lightspeed. Discovered an intermittent issue. Some of the time on tablet and phone, the hamburger button became unresponsive. Clicking should bring up the mobile navigation menu, but didn't. JavaScript files that Cadence needs to render the mobile menu became inaccessible. Interesting. Huh. Okay. Hans at Termageddon pointed me to a support article about issues with performance tools like Lightspeed. The article recommended applying the Essentials preset in Lightspeed, and doing so resolved the intermittent issue. Clicking on the hamburger works reliably again. Since you're way deeper into Lightspeed than I am, do you know what might be different between the settings you recommend for Lightspeed and the Essentials preset that might account for those JavaScripts not working? Also, is there an import-export for Lightspeed settings? Okay, so I do not know what the real difference would be, because settings that I have given in the past are pretty basic. So generally speaking, the settings are around object or around, just caching and object cache. But if you're talking about JavaScript, that's really the page optimization settings. And the only thing I recommend is minifying CSS. And then for JavaScript, minifying the JavaScript. I don't know the difference, but we can quickly experiment and find out. Dashboard. Here we go. Okay, so we're going to apply. Did you do Essentials class or Basic? Essentials preset. All right, so it's doing cache, a higher TTL, and a browser cache. So basically, this is not doing any optimization of JavaScript or anything. So that would absolutely solve the problem, but it's also not going to do any optimization at all of your JavaScript. So that's just something you would have to decide if it's worth it. So if we apply this preset and we go back and look at our page optimization, all that stuff's going to be off, probably. Now, see, that's interesting. They're going to combine JavaScript, which is, I think, more dangerous than even minifying it. That is interesting. Huh. The only other question I would have for you, class, is, are you using Cloudflare on that site? Because what can happen is, if you're optimizing JavaScript with Lightspeed, but you're not synchronizing with Cloudflare here on this page, which again is Lightspeed CDN Cloudflare, dropping in a global API or API key or token, and making sure that when you updated a page, when WordPress updates, it clears the Cloudflare cache. That can cause the local and Cloudflare versions to get out of sync and can cause these sorts of problems. This is true with any WordPress-based optimizer like Rocket or any of them. They need to be synced if you're using a CDN. You're saying it is connected to Cloudflare. So that's a good question, and I don't know. I don't have the answer for that. Why it would do that. But clearly you found the issue. It's definitely the JavaScript setting. The last part of your question is export. Yes. Under Lightspeed Toolbox, you can export your settings right here as a .data file that you can then import on another site. Yep. So whatever that was, it was definitely some compression or something was going on with your JavaScript. Now, what I would check though, class, is if you delay JavaScript, that it number one, it makes things go really quickly. But it also breaks things. Deferred, loading JavaScript deferred, I've never found to be a problem. And minifying, I've never found to be a problem. I would look at some of these settings and just see in your defaults what was set. Combining JavaScript is always a bad idea here. It breaks things in WordPress, in my experience. So it would be wonderful if someone would come along and build a plugin for WordPress that you just click the button and everything's faster. But there is not currently such a thing. Everything is granular and frustrating. All right. So I don't know if I help very much other than to definitely tell you that you can export your settings. How about that? Or yeah, move to mdash like Chris just said. Don't do that. Please don't do that. Oh my. All right. Next up is Jamie. Hey, Jamie. Oh, okay. What is your recommendation for building sites? Do you build on hosting.com with a temporary URL? Or do you build on something like a local or InstaWP and then migrate to hosting.com when you're ready to go live? Okay. So back in the dark ages, meaning, I don't know, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, when internet speeds were not what they are today, nor were server speeds what they are today, I always built locally with, I'm on a Mac, so I used MAMP as just a local development environment, and it was great. It was quick, and you could, back in those days, I was using the old Backup Buddy. You could, run Backup Buddy and move it up to the server when you're ready to launch. Then a few things changed. Number one, speeds increased, and so, gigabit fiber is life-changing. Server speeds increase. So really with a better bandwidth and a faster server, you don't really see that much difference between local and remote development. And I have people on my team now. So we need to collaborate. So local development, when you're collaborating with another human, is a little complicated, right? It's possible, maybe, but it's complicated. So what we do is we have a cPanel that has a particular development domain name on it, and we build as subdomain dot that domain. And so everything is built in cPanel on our same hosting.com server where we host everything. And that's also good because there are no surprises when you go to migrate it to live because the environment matches. So sometimes you would get, if you're developing locally, you launch it. Now there's weird hosting issues, right? And you have to figure it out. Or worse, if you're launching on a client's shared hosting environment that has 8,000 problems and it's slow as Christmas. And you got to work all that stuff out when you're ready to be done. It's better, I've found, just as for a process, to build in, this container that has our development work on it with a development domain, and then we just migrate it over to the live location when we're done. Chris is asking, do I ever miss developing that way? Not really, because, the only time where local development like that would be helpful is if I was like offline, which, that it used to be that way some in the past, but now I got a hotspot on my phone and I'm never offline, which is a good and a bad thing, but I can always connect wherever I am and, I'm online. So I really honestly don't miss it. Jamie asked, do you ever see issues when pushing local install to live? I used to, and far, far fewer. I can't remember the last environment related issue we had. Chris from my team is here. I don't know. Chris usually does the launches. I can't remember the last environment issue we had because we're in the same environment. So good question, Jamie. Thank you for that. If you have a question to ask, please use the link that is waiting on you there in the chat. We have 2 questions left, so plenty of space if you still have a question. Next is Awesome Paul. Hey, Paul. Personal-ish question for you. if you want to answer. Are you using a dedicated VPS, a VDS, or something else on hosting.com? Which do you recommend? I have a call with Mike Demo tomorrow. Well, great. The first thing I'd recommend is to have a call with Mike Demo. And Mike will talk you through seriously, ask questions, and help you decide what the best solution for you is. The immediate answer to the question for us is that we are on a hosting.com managed virtual dedicated server. Now, I like this because it is, you have guaranteed assets in a guaranteed virtual dedicated server. So a VPS is like a dedicated server parceled out, where this is actual, as containerized and separate resources as you can get. And I'll tell you, the thing that I like the most about the VDS at hosting.com is, there's two things I like the most. The first thing is the hardware is spectacular. The hardware is the best. It is so fast. It's the fastest you're going to find in offerings like this. And so performance is excellent. I hear that from people all the time. And it's been our experience. Now, the other thing that's great about these virtual servers, if you've ever been in a dedicated server or a VPS environment in the past, and you've been there for, say, I was with another web hosting company with a dedicated server for 4 years. And at the end of that 4 years, they're like, hey, your server has aged out. So like I'm on this box, like this actual, I could walk into their data center and point to, that's my box. And it's, 7 or 8 years old now, and it's older hardware, and it's aged out. And they're like, you have to upgrade. Well, how do I upgrade? Well, we got to move everything over, and it's this massive problem. How many of you have been through that hassle? It is not fun, because your IP address is going to change, and now you got to update DNS and all that. It's just horrible, right? It's going to take a week of your life, basically. You're going to have to focus on this. It's going to take a week of your life. This is where the VPS and VDS that hosting.com offers is different, because it's a layer that's sitting on top of like a cloud infrastructure. And so over time, on a rotating basis, you're just automatically upgraded to the latest tier of hardware, is the way Mike Demo explained it to me. Like, you don't even hardly know it's happening, because it happens in the background. They have their own internal built-in rotation of hardware, so that your software layer of websites is now just running on faster hardware. And it's brilliant. Your IP address doesn't change. Like, I may never have to move my server again. And I like that idea, because, I don't wake up in the morning thinking I'd love to move my server to another host. I migrated everything, we migrated everything here, and we're done for the foreseeable future, if ever again, ever, So super good. Demo is going to give you good direction. And if any of you would like to chat with Demo, I don't have his information handy. But I'm sure Katie could give us that link if anybody wants it. Okay, so did I give you a good enough explanation there, Paul? And I'm on this one. I'm on the basic VDS from hosting.com right there. 64 gigs, 800 gig NVMe storage, which is really fast. Backups included, server level. Yeah. Paul, is a VDS better than a pure dedicated server? Yes, because a dedicated server is like what I described earlier. You walk into the data center and that's your box. It's not virtual. It's a dedicated server. Yep. Thank you, Jamie. There's Mike Demo's email address. Folks, seriously, if you just want to chat, Mike has has run an agency, still does client work today. He is extremely knowledgeable, and he'll shoot you straight on what he thinks you should do based on where you are with your hosting right now. So shoot him an email, mike.demo@worldhost.group, mike.demo@worldhost.group. He'll send you his booking link, and you can find a time to chat. All right, that was an unsolicited commercial for hosting.com. Paul was not a plant. That was a legitimate question. Anything else we can follow up with on that, Paul, or has that got you covered? Okie dokie. Next up is class. Ben. Oh, that's a great question, Ben. I don't know what I don't know what the currency is. That's a great question. Oh, I don't see Katie in the chat. So I don't know. Yeah, ask Mike. Email mike.demo@worldhost.group. Uh, what I what I would imagine is whatever it is in any other currency would just be translated to, whatever, converted to. I don't know how that works. Okay, class is next. What I will say though, Ben, is that, Ollie, for example, is based in the UK. A lot of the hosting.com team is based in Europe. So, it is worldhost.group, not USA host.group. It truly, like, legitimately is a worldwide hosting company. AI created plugins and security. Oh, I've created and deployed several plugins for WordPress with the help of ChatGPT and Claude. Yep. Which, of course, raises the question of maintenance of the code and updates. That happens regularly on traditional plugins. Sometimes. Uh, but whatever AI spit out stays as installed on the website forever, which poses potential security risks. What's your take on risks and how, if and when, to get those AI created plugins updated and reviewed? That's a great question. So, first of all, let's talk about plugins because not all plugins are created equal, right? Some plugins are a glorified code snippet with a plugin header that lets them be uploaded, installed, and activated on WordPress. And it's just a code snippet that changes your date in the footer of your website, right? It's like a minimal impact, little bitty code snippet, 20 lines or 100 lines. It's very, very minor code that does a minor thing. Now, those of you that have been following me for a while, we've had this discussion about, like, should we use a WordPress plugin that hasn't been updated in 2 years in the WordPress plugin directory? And the answer is, well, maybe. It depends on what the plugin does and what the scope is. Because if it's just like a glorified code snippet wrapped in a plugin wrapper, I mean, that code's not going to change. And literally the only reason to update that code would be to bump the, last updated date. Now, if they're, and you're mentioning this in the chat class, so if they are more complicated, then yeah, does it make sense to, here's WordPress 7 coming out and there's lots of changes. Should you, as a plugin developer, which now you are, class, congratulations, you got the t-shirt. Should you be evaluating your code? Absolutely, you should. And so there's some basic things we probably ought to be doing, which is, where does your plugin code live, class? Is it in a GitHub repo? It ought to be, probably should be. My good English has just left the building. Maybe it should be there. Oh, it just lives on the website. So how do you know what's there and how is it? So if it was me, what I would do, and we haven't been good about this either in the past, and it's something that's on my list to flag for some of the work I'm doing right now with some AI tools, and that is to have GitHub repos for these custom plugins we develop for clients that do very particular things, and have those in GitHub. And now my Claude desktop app can talk to all that and push the updates to GitHub if it wants to. And maybe we create a self-updating plugin out of that. That's a direction we might end up going. But at the very least, it's a local folder. So Claude or any other folder-aware AI tool, Claude's probably the best right now. You can just point Claude at that folder and go, digest this plugin, figure out what's going on, flag any potential security risks. It'll digest all this and give you recommendations, and even write directly to that folder to update the files for you and update the version for you. So that's the way I would do it. And it really does make sense. Like, if you've got fairly complicated plugins that are doing things, dropping it into an AI tool for a security review is probably a good idea. And it will look for security holes and do a pretty darn good job of it, especially if you're running at Claude Opus. Claude Opus is much more capable than Sonnet, which is Sonnet is the middle level, Opus is the highest level. So I just kind of talked around the world there. Does that make sense, class? So just for example, um, this is like the other side of that, but I solved a problem for a client just this week, also related to Termageddon for whatever reason. It was the WooCommerce official Pinterest plugin pushes out the Pinterest pixel in a way that Termageddon or any other cookie consent tool cannot address. And so, like, it doesn't show up. You can't block that because it's just really poor coding from the developer. Like, it doesn't have a hook that can address it. It's just poorly done. So, what did we do? I went out to the WordPress plugin repo, downloaded the plugin zip file, exploded, the folder. So it's sitting there on my desktop. I gave Claude access to that folder and said, first, take a look at this plugin, make sure you understand what's going on. So it scanned the files. Okay, this is what it does. I understand what's going on. And then I gave it the problem. Okay, this is what's going on. This is the note back from Termageddon. This is where it needs to be changed and whatever. And it went through, found the right file, rewrote it, and done. And so I thought, okay, that's great. We just updated the plugin with this code. That's not helpful. What we really need is a snippet that we can add to a snippet plugin or an MU plugin or whatever that takes over and pushes the pixel out correctly. So I said, okay, well, instead of updating the core plugin, what you need to do is create a code snippet that we can add to the site without updating the core plugin. Because, as we all know, when the plugin updates, our custom code gets wiped out. So we don't want that to happen. So it used this knowledge. It created a code snippet, put it on the site. It solves the problem. So giving Claude context of a plugin folder, even a fairly complicated plugin like the official WooCommerce Pinterest plugin, totally works. It can digest that whole plugin tree and understand what's going on. Now, part of what we're doing with the way we write code is there's a little agent that we have that will pass through, it's already program with some instructions on how to check code for security vulnerabilities. So, as the final pass for any new code you write, make sure you do a security vulnerability pass. Anyway, that was a very long answer to a potentially not long question. Does that make sense, class? Anybody else have follow-ups on that? All right. Oh, and by the way, I was about to say, the local access that Claude gives is a game changer, like we demonstrated on the live stream on Tuesday, except for when it bogged down. And you know what it was? When all else fails, reboot the freaking computer. That's what it was. Reboot the computer. And I felt kind of foolish after we were all done with that. But at least you got to see a troubleshooting process. Anyway, a reboot solved all of that. It was just a local computer resource issue. So I guess it's a double-edged sword of letting Claude have local access. Anyway, next up, and this is the final question we have in the list. So if you have a question to ask, please use that link in the chat. Whoop, that's not it. The question is from Billy. Hey, Billy. And Billy says, I am currently working on an app with Greta that is linked to Netifly.com. I have never heard of Netifly. Anybody aware of that? What is Netifly? And who is Greta? Ooh, okay. I don't know what that was, but that wasn't it. That was a very bad URL. Let's try Greta. Okay. Greta is a vibe coding platform. Got it. Okay. And is it Netify? Because this URL redirects to very sketchy websites. Netlify. Netlify. Okay. This is how easy it is to hack me on a live stream. Okay. No hackers should be listening to that. There we go. Okay. All right. So what this is an app hosting platform. I would recommend that you try the hosting.com one of these. But yes. Okay. So this is Greta is like Lovable in that it is a vibe coding app platform, and Netlify is the hosting platform. Got it. Okay. Are you aware of any issues with hosting the app here? Clearly, I've never heard of it before. So, um, I have no opinion. I will say that this is what I use to build apps. And I've got a couple now that we're actively using as part of our agency tool stack, and they work really, really well. It's crazy how well they work. I build all of that in Lovable because it's just, you don't have to worry about a builder here and a host here. It's all wrapped into one service. And once you get it built, you can just leave it up there and it works for $5 a month. Um, so I've been using the Lovable platform. So I really don't have any experience with these. Chris has used these. And so maybe Chris could speak to that. Pretty cool. So I guess Netlify and Greta are sibling companies and they kind of work together probably. So Chris says he has a couple apps right in there. That's cool. I haven't used it. I have no opinion. I'm assuming it works pretty well. Okay, you're gonna attach Bolt to Netlify also. Yeah, so it's gonna host it. The reason that I went with Lovable is because of the back end with Supabase, which is like a database, cloud database platform with lots of built-in snippets for login and passkeys and two-factor and all of these things built in. And it handles security thing like API keys really well. That's why I went that direction. I've just not ever experimented with this set of tools. And gosh, there's so many of them out there today, y'all. It'd be a full-time job just to experiment with all of them, right? Oh, you can link Supabase to Greta. Interesting. Uh, I love Supabase. It is incredibly powerful. So Greta was an AppSumo deal. Cool. All right. Interesting. Well, I mean, Billy, congratulations for getting out there and vibe coding something. We've got some, like I said, there are two apps that I built for our agency that are incredibly practical and powerful. And so that's really the question to ask is like these days, here's this problem that I used to go have to hunt for an app to solve, or an AppSumo deal, or somebody built a SaaS for this, and maybe my problem was 20% of the 80% that the SaaS did, but I was having to pay for all of it. You can often solve your own problems with a vibe coded web app that and just make it work. And it's really, really remarkable. Yeah, so Sue has gotten a little peek behind the scenes of something we've developed. And it is pretty darn cool. Not something I can talk about publicly right now at all. But anyway, okay, that brings us to the end of our office hours questions. This was fun. So in retrospect, WordPress is not dead. Don't just look at the URL somebody sends you in a question and go for vibe coding. It's fun. All right, everybody. One quick note on next week's office hours. I will be traveling, but there will still be office hours. I will be at PressConf next week in Phoenix. Office hours will be live from my hotel room. Again, we've done that a few times as I've been on the road, but we will have office hours as usual, same time, just without colored backgrounds. But feel free to ask your questions as always, and I will see you back here Thursday for office hours here. Oh, actually, and I will see you Tuesday. Tuesday, Plugin Roundup is coming back, and I'm thrilled about that. We've got a great list, and I hope you'll join me for that if you haven't already. All right, we will see you next week here on Hosting.com's Agency Success, where we go further together.